Laura Jensen had been up since 4 a.m. Traveling with a baby was never easy, but doing it alone brought a special kind of chaos. Her husband had hugged her goodbye at the curb, loading the last of her bags into the cart before rushing back to beat morning traffic that left Laura caffeine-deprived, slightly frazzled, but determined, navigating Atlanta's sprawling airport with a diaper bag, carry-on, stroller, and a 10-month-old who had already lost one sock and drooled on her sleeve. Still, things were going smoothly. She made it through security without any major breakdowns, managed to grab a muffin and bottle of water, and even found a row of seats near gate C12, where she could finally breathe. Caleb, her wide-eyed little explorer, was busy gripping a teething toy and babbling happily. Laura pulled out a small blanket, spread it over her lap, and cradled him while checking the flight time on her phone. Just under an hour until boarding. Not bad. That's when she noticed the dog. About 15 feet away sat a tall man in his late 30s with a golden retriever at his feet. The dog wore a bright red vest with bold white lettering that read, "Service Animal. Do not pet." Laura barely registered it at first. She liked dogs, and she'd seen service animals in airports before. What stood out was how still the dog was, alert, eyes locked on Caleb. It didn't seem threatening, just focused. She gave the man a polite smile. He nodded slightly, not speaking, his eyes scanning the terminal but returning often to the dog. Laura turned her attention back to Caleb and took out a small bottle. The baby drank quietly, his long lashes fluttering. He was tired, and she hoped he'd sleep on the plane. Just as she was thinking that, a sharp, single bark broke the moment. Her eyes shot up. It was the service dog. Laura blinked, surprised. The bark wasn't loud enough to draw a security guard, but it was sharp, intentional. She glanced at the man. He said nothing, gave a quiet command, and the dog sat back down but didn't take his eyes off Caleb. Weird, she thought. Maybe the dog was just anxious. 10 seconds later, another bark, this one more urgent, then a soft growl. People were starting to notice. A woman nearby looked over her magazine with a frown. A man tugged out his earbuds and muttered something about noise. Laura shifted uncomfortably. Caleb stirred slightly but didn't cry. Still, the dog would not stop staring. His tail wasn't wagging. He wasn't restless. He was waiting. Laura finally spoke up, half laughing to break the tension. "Is your dog okay?" The man finally looked at her fully. "Yes, he's trained. He's picking something up." "Picking something up?" she asked, furrowing her brow. "Medical alert," he said. "He's a seizure detection dog." Laura blinked, unsure what to say. Caleb wasn't sick. He hadn't had any medical episodes. Maybe the dog was picking up something. Nearby airports were full of people. Maybe the dog was just tired or misreading something. The dog barked again, sharper this time, louder. Passengers were starting to grumble. A gate agent leaned out from behind the counter. "Sir, please control your animal or I'll have to ask you both to step aside." "He's trained," the man said again, not raising his voice. "He's trying to warn us." Laura looked down at Caleb. His eyes were still open, but he had stopped babbling. His hands were no longer grabbing at the blanket. He was just still. And then something inside her shifted. A mother's intuition. That invisible string that tightens when anything feels off. She looked up at the dog again. Bark, bark, bark. The dog's gaze didn't waver, not once. The terminal was no longer quiet. Hunter, the golden retriever in the red vest, was now barking in steady bursts, short, forceful, precise. Not aggressive, not fearful. It was as if he was trying to speak in a language everyone else had forgotten how to hear. Passengers around Laura shifted in their seats. Some stared. Others rolled their eyes and shook their heads, clearly irritated. A woman a few rows away huffed, pulled out her phone, and started typing furiously, probably a complaint tweet in progress. A man holding a briefcase muttered, "This is why dogs shouldn't be allowed in airports, even the so-called trained ones." Laura sat frozen. She glanced at Caleb. He was quiet now, not asleep, just oddly still. His eyes were open, but unfocused, his tiny fingers limp on the edge of the blanket. Her pulse quickened. The handler, calm, focused, tightened his grip on Hunter's harness and crouched beside the dog. "Good boy," he whispered. "Tell me what you see." Hunter barked again and moved forward, straining slightly against the handler's firm hold. His gaze never left Caleb. Laura looked up at the man. "Is something wrong with my baby?" she asked, her voice trembling for the first time. "I don't know for sure," he said, meeting her eyes. "But my dog does." That answer didn't comfort her. Not yet. Her mind raced. What could a dog possibly know about her child? Caleb had never had health problems, no chronic conditions, no allergies. He had been fussy the day before, but was eating and sleeping normally. Laura hadn't even packed fever medicine. I think he's tired, she said quickly, defensively. He was up early. Maybe he just Hunter let out a loud, single bark that silenced even the complaints. Okay, that's enough. The woman from earlier stood up, arms crossed. You need to get that animal under control. This is not acceptable. Laura opened her mouth to speak, but the gate agent beat her to it. Stepping forward, sir, she said, directing her voice at the handler. I need you and your dog to move to the assistant's desk until you can calm him down. We've had multiple passenger complaints. He's working, the man said. He's trained for medical detection. He's trying to alert me to something. With all due respect, the agent said, her tone clipped. You need to remove the dog from the gate area. Now, the handler sighed, looked down at Hunter, and gave a command Laura didn't understand. Hunter sat reluctantly, still focused on Caleb. And then, in a split second, everything changed. Caleb's head dropped to the side. His little body arched slightly in Laura's arms. He let out a sound high-pitched and short that sent chills down her spine. His legs twitched once, then again. Laura's voice cracked open into a scream. Something's wrong. Help, he's not breathing right. The gate agent's demeanor shattered. The woman who had been yelling stepped back in shock. The terminal, once filled with grumbling, fell into a stunned, sudden silence. The handler stood up fast. Call medical, he barked at the agent. Right now, it's happening. Laura's hands shook as she cradled Caleb's body, which had gone stiff, his lips parting in shallow gasps. His face looked different, pale, confused, frightened. Then his little hands clenched into fists, and his eyes began fluttering. Please, Laura sobbed. Somebody help him, I've got you. The handler said, they're coming. Hunter let out one final bark, then stood completely still. Everyone in the terminal had stopped moving. Even the angry voices had disappeared. People were standing, watching, helpless. And in the center of it all, a mother clutched her child while a dog that couldn't speak human had somehow known something no one else did. The gate agent's voice cracked over the radio as she called for emergency medical assistance. Medical, gate C12, infant seizure, immediate response needed. Round Laura, the world turned hazy, unreal. Her baby's body was twitching in her arms, rigid and unfamiliar. His little fingers usually always moving, always exploring were curled unnaturally tight. Laura kept whispering his name like a mantra. Caleb, Caleb, please, look at me, baby, you're okay. Mommy's here. But he didn't look, he couldn't. His eyes rolled back, and a strange sound rattled from his throat. Passengers stood frozen, staring in horrified silence. The mood had shifted completely. Where there had once been annoyance and impatience, now there was disbelief, guilt, concern. A woman who had earlier snapped at the handler was now clutching her chest, whispering, "Oh my God." The handler stepped closer, one hand still gripping Hunter's harness. The dog was no longer barking. He stood alert, tail stiff, body tense, every muscle ready. "I think it's a febrile seizure," the handler said calmly, kneeling beside Laura. "They're usually caused by a spike in fever. It might look terrifying, but it's common in infants." "How hot did he feel earlier?" I didn't check," Laura stammered. "He was warm this morning, but he wasn't crying. He didn't seem sick. I thought he was just tired." The handler nodded, not judging. "It can come on without much warning. Hunter's trained to pick up early changes in body chemistry. He was trying to alert us to this before it happened." Laura could barely comprehend what she was hearing. A dog had known her baby was about to seize before even she had. How did he know?" she asked. "They smell it," he said. "He detects subtle shifts, temperature, cortisol levels, electrical activity. He's trained to alert me when he senses a seizure is coming, even in someone nearby." Before Laura could respond, a team of medics rushed into view, wheeling a stretcher and carrying emergency bags. One of them, a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and calm hands, immediately crouched next to Caleb. "Infant seizure?" she asked. Laura nodded, too choked to speak. "All right, let's get him down." "Has this happened before?" "No," Laura whispered. Never. Any known conditions?" "No. He was healthy. He was fine just an hour ago." Hunter stayed back but didn't take his eyes off Caleb. The medic noticed. "Is that a seizure dog?" she asked, glancing at the handler. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "He caught it before anyone did." The medic gave a quick nod of respect. "Good dog, working with practiced efficiency." The team laid Caleb on a blanket beside the stroller. One medic checked his pulse, another took his temperature. Laura hovered nearby, tears streaking down her face, wringing her hands. Temps 103.7. One medic called out. Fever likely triggered it. They applied cool cloths, loosened his clothes, and gave him oxygen. Slowly, Caleb's body began to relax. His limbs settled, his fingers uncurled. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, just long enough to lock onto his mother's face before slipping closed again. He's stable now, the lead medic said gently. We're taking him to Children's Hospital for monitoring, but I think he's going to be all right. Laura fell to her knees, sobbing into her hands. Relief, terror, confusion, it all came crashing down at once. Hunter let out a soft whine. The crowd remained still, almost reverent. The same people who had moments ago treated the handler like a nuisance were now staring at the dog, like he was something more, something beyond explanation. The handler stood beside Laura, quiet and grounded. I know it sounds strange, he said softly, but sometimes instinct beats logic. My dog doesn't guess, he listens, and today, he listened better than any of us. The sound of wheels against the tile floor echoed through the terminal as the medical team rolled Caleb toward the elevator, headed for the airport ambulance dock. Laura walked beside the stretcher, never letting go of his tiny hand, her heart pounding with every step. Her son's face looked calm now, but his skin was still pale, and his breathing shallow. Every now and then, his eyelids would flutter, as though he were trying to wake up but couldn't quite manage it. Behind them, the handler and Hunter followed quietly. Passengers parted for them without a word. Once inside the elevator, the paramedic standing across from Laura looked over the clipboard and then glanced at the handler. You're with them? The man hesitated. Sort of. The dog alerted to the seizure. I don't know them personally. The medic raised her eyebrows. You caught it before it happened? He gave a small nod. He did. Laura turned to face him. Her voice was low, raw from crying. You said he could smell it. That he just knows. Yes, Hunter is trained to alert to oncoming seizures and some other medical events. I've seen him respond to diabetic crashes, heart arrhythmias, even panic attacks before they visibly start. He doesn't get it wrong. Laura looked down at Caleb again, her voice catching. He saved my baby's life. There were no more barks, now just a watchful stillness. Hunter sat beside his handler, panting softly, ears alert but body calm. He wasn't agitated anymore. Whatever signal he detected had passed. He had done his job. The ambulance bay was already open when they arrived. A team of EMTs helped lift Caleb into the back of the vehicle. One of the medics turned to Laura. We'll have you ride with him. It's only about 15 minutes to the hospital. Do you want someone to call ahead for your family? She nodded, fumbling for her phone. As she climbed into the ambulance, she turned to the handler, who stood just outside the doors with Hunter at his side. I don't even know your name. Daniel, he said simply. And this is Hunter. Laura placed a hand over her heart, searching for words that wouldn't come. Daniel gave a small smile. You don't need to thank me. Thank him. Hunter looked up at her, his eyes as steady and calm as they had been the moment he first barked. The doors closed with a soft thud. Inside the ambulance, Laura held Caleb's hand and pressed her forehead to his. All she could think about was what might have happened if she dismissed the barking, if they'd boarded the plane, if they were 30,000 feet in the air when the seizure hit. No doctors, no medics, no room to move, no chance to save him. But none of that happened because of a dog. Back at the terminal, passengers finally began to stir, whispering to one another as the shock began to wear off. I thought that dog was just being aggressive, one woman murmured. I almost asked the gate agent to call security, another man admitted quietly. The gate agent, still pale, stood at her podium staring out the window at the disappearing ambulance. I've seen delays, she whispered to her co-worker. I've seen people faint and kids get sick, but I've never seen a dog call it before the mother even knew. Never. Daniel gave Hunter a small pat on the side and whispered something only the dog could hear. Then he turned and began walking toward the exit. No fuss, no attention, no victory lap. Just a handler and his silent guardian, disappearing into the crowd, as if nothing had happened. But for Laura and for Caleb, everything had changed. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beep of the monitor tracking Caleb's heart rate. Laura sat by his bedside, one hand gripping the metal rail, the other resting lightly on his stomach. His fever had gone down, his color was returning, and the doctor had assured her that he was stable. But she hadn't relaxed, not completely, not yet. The pediatric neurologist had already been in twice. Likely a febrile seizure, he'd said. Scary, but common. The first one always feels like the end of the world, but many children only experience it once. That should have been comforting, but something about it didn't sit right. With Laura. She kept thinking about the airport, the barking, the dog. How had he known? The timing was too precise, not just a guess, not a coincidence. The seizure hadn't started until minutes later, yet Hunter had known something was coming, and that something still nagged at her. Her thoughts were interrupted when the door clicked open and a nurse stepped in, carrying a tablet. "Hi again, Mom," she said gently. Dr. Kaplan reviewed Caleb's blood work. "Everything looks okay, overall. But there's one thing." Laura's heart jumped. "What is it?" "He has a slight electrolyte imbalance. Not dangerous, but unusual for someone with no recent illness or vomiting. His sodium levels dropped rapidly this morning, which could have contributed to the seizure." "Is that normal?" The nurse hesitated. "Not exactly. We're not sure what caused it. He had no symptoms earlier." "No, nothing. He was just warm." She tapped the side of the bed, lost in thought. Then she asked, "Could it be something more serious?" "That's what we're checking," the nurse replied. "We've ordered a few more labs, and Dr. Kaplan may want to run a scan just to rule out anything deeper like a neurological trigger or an undiagnosed condition." Laura swallowed hard. Her brain raced. Was this more than just a one-time episode? She barely slept that night. Caleb remained under observation, and while his fever dropped, his energy wasn't quite back. Every twitch made her jump. Every quiet sigh made her hold her breath. At 7 a.m., she stepped into the hallway to call her husband and give him the update. She kept her voice steady, but her hand trembled the whole time. After the call, she turned around and froze. At the end of the corridor stood a familiar figure, Daniel, and beside him, Hunter. Laura blinked in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Daniel gave a small smile. "I called to check on you last night. The paramedics said which hospital you came to. I thought I'd stop by, just to make sure everything was okay." Hunter stood silently, his tail giving one soft wag when he saw her. Laura swallowed the sudden lump in her throat. "He saved Caleb's life." Daniel nodded. "I've seen him do it before, but this one was different. He wouldn't stop." She walked toward them slowly. "The doctors said Caleb had an electrolyte imbalance. They're not sure what caused it. They're running more tests." Daniel looked down at Hunter. He sensed something off before it happened. If he was that persistent, it might have been more than just the seizure itself. He picks up on underlying issues, sometimes before machines do. Laura looked up at him. "So you think something else might be going on?" "I don't know," he said. "But Hunter wouldn't have barked like that unless he was sure. And when he's sure, I listen." Laura turned back toward Caleb's room, her heart tight in her chest. Something deeper was unfolding, and the dog knew more than anyone else in the room. Later that morning, as Caleb rested in his crib-like hospital bed, the pediatric team returned with more results. Laura sat upright as Dr. Kaplan entered, followed by a younger doctor and a nurse carrying a chart. "Mrs. Benson," the doctor began gently, "we've finished the lab analysis and reviewed the CT scan we ordered early this morning." Laura's hands gripped the edge of the chair. "Is something wrong?" The doctor's expression was calm but serious. "Nothing immediately dangerous, and Caleb is stable. But his skin showed slight swelling in the temporal lobe, an unusual finding. For a simple febrile seizure, it could suggest a viral trigger, or something neurological. It's subtle, but enough that we want to do an MRI next." Laura blinked. "But he's okay now, right?" "He is, and we're going to keep him under close watch. But I'm glad you got here when you did. If that swelling had progressed without intervention, things could have been worse." "Worse." That word echoed in her ears like thunder. Her stomach turned. Then a soft noise broke through the tension. A quiet, steady thump. Laura turned. Hunter was standing just inside the room's threshold, his nose lifted, his body tense, eyes locked on Caleb again. Not barking but alert. Daniel stood beside him, unmoving, letting the dog work. Dr. Kaplan furrowed his brow. "Is that the dog that detected the seizure?" Laura nodded. "Yes. He knew before anyone did." The nurse blinked. "I've heard stories, but I've never seen one in action." Daniel knelt beside Hunter. The dog moved forward, nose near the bedrail, sniffing deeply, not frantic, but focused. "He's trying to tell me something," Daniel murmured. "Same posture as at the airport, not barking this time, but he's definitely alerting." The doctor watched with cautious curiosity. "What do you think he's picking up?" Daniel stood, his voice low but certain. "He smells another event coming." The doctor stepped closer to the monitors, checked Caleb's vitals again. "Everything Looks stable right now. Hunter's not watching the machines. Daniel replied. He's watching Caleb. Suddenly, Caleb stirred. His hand twitched once. Then again, his eyelids fluttered. Laura shot out of her seat, heart pounding. Doctor. The nurse leaned in, placing a hand lightly on Caleb's chest, pulse rising slightly. And then, just like before, Caleb's back arched and his arm stiffened. Seizure. The younger doctor confirmed. Get the rescue meds. Now, the nurse moved fast, reaching into the drawer. While Dr. Kaplan stayed at Caleb's side, Laura backed away, pressing her fist to her mouth. It was happening again, just like at the airport, but this time, she wasn't caught off guard. This time, she had known, because Hunter had known. The seizure was shorter than the last. The meds helped. Quickly. Within minutes, Caleb's body relaxed again, and the team resumed monitoring. Laura leaned heavily against the wall, tears of relief sliding down her cheeks. Daniel looked at the doctor. That's why he barked at the airport. This isn't just a wartime fever seizure. There's something more happening. Dr. Kaplan nodded slowly, processing everything. I believe you. If we hadn't seen that early scan, and if we weren't already watching for a second event, this could have been more serious. He turned to Hunter. I never thought I'd say this, but your dog may have just prevented a neurological emergency. Hunter gave a soft wag of his tail, as if he already knew. Laura crouched beside him, one hand gently stroking his fur. You're the reason my son is still here, she whispered. Daniel gave her a quiet smile. He just listens, that's all. Sometimes, the body speaks in ways we can't hear, but he always does. The sun dipped behind the skyline, casting golden rays across the hospital room as Laura stood by the window, phone in hand, her knuckles white from gripping it too tightly. She had just ended a call with her husband, Ryan, who was still across the country, trying to get the earliest flight to reach them. He'd been calm, supportive, but the decision now rested on her shoulders. Behind her, Caleb stirred in his sleep, a soft rustle of blankets the only sound. His cheeks had regained some color, and his tiny fingers occasionally twitched in his dreams. The test results weren't all back yet, but the doctors were increasingly convinced something deeper was at play, something chronic, possibly genetic, and far from straightforward. Hunter lay, ever watchful, beside the crib. Daniel sat quietly in a corner, his presence respectful, letting Laura process everything in her own time. Then Dr. Kaplan returned. He entered with a clipboard, looking as if he'd aged overnight. We have the preliminary findings, he said gently, his tone low and steady. Caleb's metabolic irregularities aren't isolated. He may have a rare condition, something that affects how his body regulates sodium and glucose levels under stress. Laura's heart clenched. Is it treatable? Potentially. But it requires immediate lifestyle adjustments, frequent monitoring, specialized medications. And this is the complicated part of preventive response system, preferably one that acts before symptoms occur. Her voice cracked. You mean like Hunter? The doctor nodded slowly. Exactly like Hunter. Machines won't always detect a crash until it's too late. But Hunter has done it twice now, early enough to prevent the worst. Laura turned toward the dog. He was resting, but his ears perked up at the sound of his name. Then what's the choice? She asked. Kaplan hesitated. It's not our call to make. But Daniel explained that Hunter is only temporarily assigned to assist. He's a medical alert dog trained through a special grant. Normally, once a child's condition is confirmed, and the need is documented, families apply to receive a permanent canine partner. Laura's voice lowered. How long would that take? Months, Kaplan replied. Sometimes a year. There's a waiting list. The weight of those words settled into the room like a fog. A year? She echoed. But Caleb might not even make it through a flight. He nearly didn't yesterday. Daniel finally spoke, quiet but firm. There's another option. Laura looked at him, desperate. Tell me. I can sign over Hunter's transfer, he said. I've spoken with my organization. Given the circumstances, and the medical documentation already on file, it can be expedited. He can stay with Caleb permanently, if you choose it. Laura stared at him, her lips parting. But what about your other patients? I've trained other dogs, he said with a faint smile, and they'll get the care they need. But this, what I saw between Hunter and your son, it's rare. He's already chosen Caleb. We don't force that bond, we follow it. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. You already did, Daniel replied. You trusted him. That's all any handler hopes for. She sank down beside Hunter, her hands buried in his thick fur. Would you stay with us? Be part of our family? Hunter responded by gently licking her wrist, then walking over to Caleb's bedside, placing his head against the frame once more. The answer was clear. That evening, as hospital staff prepared Hunter's temporary overnight bed and began the paperwork for transfer, Laura stood by Caleb's crib and whispered, "You don't know it yet, baby boy, but you've just been given the strongest guardian I've ever seen." Outside, the sky faded into stars, and inside, in a hospital room lit softly by monitors and quiet hope, a mother made the impossible choice, and chose love. 2 months later, the air at the park was crisp with early spring. Children ran across the grassy fields with kites trailing behind them. The sound of laughter filled the air, but none was sweeter than the giggle coming from Caleb. He sat on a picnic blanket under the watchful gaze of his mother, his tiny hands gripping a plush giraffe, his cheeks round and rosy again. Beside him, tail thumping lightly in the grass, lay Hunter, his body relaxed but his eyes as alert as ever. Hunter didn't stray more than a few feet from Caleb, not even when other children passed by with cookies or balls. He had one priority now, one assignment, and he never forgot it. Laura watched them both, her heart full in a way it hadn't been in months. So much had changed since that terrifying day at the airport. Caleb had been officially diagnosed with glucose-sodium channel dysregulation syndrome, a rare metabolic condition that caused sudden and unpredictable drops in electrolytes and blood sugar. But with daily medication, constant hydration, and nutritional monitoring, his doctors were hopeful. And with Hunter by his side, everyone, especially Laura, felt safer. Daniel had completed the transfer papers within the week. The hospital's medical team expedited Caleb's case, and the service dog registry approved the permanent pairing in record time. The first night Hunter slept at their house, he curled up next to Caleb's crib without needing to be told. By the third night, he had already learned the layout of the home. By the fifth, he had woken Laura at 2 a.m. with a low growl just moments before Caleb began to stir, his body temperature rising. No sirens, no panic, just a quiet alert and a fast response. That moment sealed it for Laura. Hunter wasn't just a lifesaver, he was family. Today, watching Caleb toddle a few feet on unsteady legs, then plop down again in the grass, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. Daniel approached from the path, holding two coffees. "You look like you finally slept a full night," he joked, handing her a cup. Laura chuckled. "That's because I did. First time since before all of this." He sat beside her on the blanket. "Caleb looks stronger." "He is," she said, smiling, "and more curious. He started mimicking Hunter yesterday, crawled over to his water bowl and pretended to sniff it." They both laughed. Daniel looked at Hunter, who hadn't moved a muscle despite their conversation. "He knows his job, and now that it's official, he's more devoted than ever." Laura nodded, her gaze soft. "I didn't believe in these kinds of connections before, between animals and people. I thought it was exaggerated, but it's real." Daniel didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "The bond is instinctual. You can't train it, you can only guide it." Hunter chose Caleb the moment he barked that first time. She reached out, placing a hand on Daniel's. "You changed our lives," he smiled modestly. "I just delivered the dog." Caleb and Hunter did the rest. A breeze passed through the park, tugging gently at the edge of the picnic blanket. Caleb squealed in delight as a butterfly floated near him. Hunter lifted his head slightly, scanned the boy's posture, and relaxed again. Laura leaned back on her hands, letting the sunlight warm her face. "You know what the airport security agent told me that day?" she asked Daniel. "What?" "She said sometimes chaos introduces you to the very thing you didn't know you needed." Daniel glanced at Caleb, then at Hunter. She was right. As the sun dipped low on the horizon and the shadows lengthened across the grass, Caleb crawled toward Hunter, giggling. The dog nudged him gently with his nose. Together, the boy and his dog sat side by side, a team, a miracle, a new beginning.